All of the NBA Finals matchups this month between the Celtics and Mavericks will be on at Walters Sports Bar in the Navy Yard District. Walters is open late, so no closing before the end of the game.
Whether you're a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all understand the importance of mental and physical well-being and proper recovery for top-notch performance. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring podcasts on the Blue Wire Network. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or EE System. If you haven't heard of the EE System yet, then you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Wherever you are across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. Interested in experiencing the EE System technology for yourself? Go to unifiedhealing.com/bluewire to learn more and find a center near you. That's unified, UNIFYD, healing.com/bluewire. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment and before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, including EE System.
The 1-2 pitch. Swinging a ground ball to third. Senzel has it, looks at home, has no play. Now he has to hurry to first, and he gets the out there with Gallo to stretch. So Kwan scores on the ground out. Freeman holds it second, and it's 2-0 Cleveland. Here's the pitch to David Fry, and it's blasted in the air, deep left center field. Way back this one goes. Rosario at the wall, looking up. See you later. Home run number 8 for Fry. 6-1 Guardians.
And welcome to Nats Chat for Saturday, June 1st, 2024, along with MASNsports.com Nationals insider Mark Zuckerman, who is at Progressive Field in Cleveland. I'm Al Galdi, host of the Al Galdi podcast. The Nats on Friday night lost at the American League Central, leading Cleveland Guardians 7-1 in Game 1 of a 3-game series. The Nats for this regular season fall to 26-30. But you know, it almost feels like the Guardians deserve a half win for this victory, and the Nats' previous opponent, the Atlanta Braves, deserve the other half of the win. The Braves and Miami Marlins are notorious for hosting getaway night games as opposed to getaway day games. The Nats' 3-1 win at the Braves on Thursday night started at 7:21 p.m. Eastern on Thursday, didn't end until 9:56 p.m. Eastern on Thursday, and the Nats did not get to their hotel in Cleveland until about 5 a.m. Eastern on Friday. And so the Nats, who, of course, aren't exactly gangbusters offensively to begin with, were rather lifeless offensively on Friday night. 1 run, a mere 4 hits, which were a double and 3 singles, 1 walk, 11 strikeouts, 0 for 4 with runners in scoring position. Patrick Corbin did pitch well. The Nats bullpen was bad. The burial of Tanner Rainey continues. We'll get to all of that. But, Mark, I can't imagine that the Nats are pleased with the Braves for this continued scheduling of getaway night games.
No, and it's funny, Al, they were talking about it all week leading up to that game. They certainly were talking about it after the fact. You know, it was the late game anyways. And then on top of that, their charter flight was delayed quite a bit. They were waiting around for the plane to get to them. So they took off much later than they normally would have, even after a night game. And as you said, some of them didn't even get into the hotel until 5 a.m. Now, you know, they're being careful not to use that as an excuse for how they played. They're not the only team that's ever been in that kind of situation. They had all morning and afternoon to rest up, didn't have BP. Davey gave them a late arrival time. But it sure looked like that was affecting them. Or if not, it was Tanner Bybee, who's very good, or it has something to do with the fact that the Nats lineup just very often is not very good. So that's a bad convergence of events there that kind of led to a predictable result. The shame of this game is that in spite of the lack of offense, until the 7th inning, they're right there in it. It's 2-1. They actually got a good quality start from Patrick Corbin, and then it all fell apart after that.
It did, as the Nats bullpen was not particularly good in this game. With the scheduling, what exactly is the rule when it comes to scheduling a getaway game as you are the home team?
My understanding is, and this is in the CBA and something that was added into it particularly in the last one, is if a flight is more than 2.5 hours from wherever you're finishing a series to wherever you're starting the next series and you have no off day in between, then it's required to be a getaway day game, not a night game. The flight from Atlanta to Cleveland, even though it would seem like it's far away, is less than 2.5 hours. And so that's why the Braves were able to get away with it. Look, we've seen the Nats have getaway night games as well. Sometimes they do that to the Mets or some of the other East Coast teams, especially if they're staying on the East Coast. I do think there's a fair point to be made here that no matter where you're coming from, no matter how long the flight is, if you're not giving guys a day off after a series finale, you're really doing them a disservice and you're doing your fans a disservice. If fans are paying to watch these games and they're not getting everybody at their absolute physical best, I think you're shortchanging them. And I understand teams would much rather host a night game on a Thursday than a 1 o'clock game. You're going to get better attendance at a night game. But the Braves aren't hurting for attendance right now. And I think they would have been just fine holding that game even at 4 o'clock, not even asking for a 1 o'clock game. And it's unfortunate. I hate that that's the topic of this one coming into it. And it may or may not have anything to do with the game, but clearly it was on everyone's mind. And that includes the Nationals themselves.
Yeah, and we bring all of this up not so that everyone sheds tears for the Nats. I mean, look, these players get treated like kings. They travel in a way that most of us can only dream of, and I think it's important to note that. Also, I'm sure a lot of people listening work on, short sleep and work odd hours, and, we all deal with stuff like that. But I do think scheduling is interesting, and look, if you're the Braves, it does give you a competitive advantage when you face a division foe and you send them off via a getaway night game like that. I mean, let's be honest, right? Like if the Nats and Braves were contending for the division and the Braves schedule this getaway night game like this and it puts the Nats in a bad spot, that does the Braves some good. So I don't know if that's a part of the Braves doing this, but it does end up aiding the Braves. So something to think about there. In terms of the Nats offense in this game, so like I said, 4 hits. The 4 hits were 3 Luis Garcia Jr. singles and an Eddie Rosario RBI double. And that was it for your Nats offense in this game. Eddie Rosario as the Nats starting left fielder and number 6 batter, 1 for 4 with an RBI double. He struck out 3 times, but he and the Nats lone run scoring inning, a 1-run 7th, a 1-out RBI double to right field to cut the Nats deficit to 2-1. Like Mark said, this was a game in the latter innings. This actually ended up being yet another competitive Nats game until it wasn't, but it was close for a good chunk of this game. And then Luis Garcia Jr., we haven't talked a ton about him lately. He had not been doing so well, but he did do well in this game. Starting second baseman and cleanup batter, 3 for 4 with 3 singles. He in the top of the 4th had a 1-out single to right center field despite having been down at 1.02. Garcia in the Nats, 1-run 7th, a leadoff single to center field, and Garcia in the top of the 9th, a 1-out opposite field single to left field. He kind of needed a game like this.
Yeah, you're right. He did. And Davey's been using him in prominent spots in the lineup. He's hit cleanup in this game. He's hit, the top half of the lineup, certainly most of the time. Talking to him afterwards, he felt like it was a good matchup for him. That Tanner Rainey's a tough pitcher, no doubt, but he is a fastball guy, throws fastballs up in the zone, and that's actually what Luis hits best. We know he can connect with fastball. His issue is more chasing breaking balls out of the zone. So for him, he felt like it was maybe a favorable matchup, but you understand why that wasn't necessarily the case for a lot of the other guys in the lineup. They need to see more of this from Garcia. Got off to that great start to the season, but he's not a proven commodity yet. He needs to show that he can do this over a full season. And, you're right. We haven't talked about him a lot. And I think we have to be careful here. Like, he hasn't solidified himself as the second baseman of the future. There's certainly been a lot of encouraging developments there and given them way more reason than they had coming into the season to think that he can be the long-term part of this. But he's got to show this now over multiple months and over the course of the season. And so it's good for him to have a night like this against a very good pitcher.
Otherwise, not much happening with this Nats offense in the game. Lane Thomas, who had been so good since coming off the injured list, he on Friday night as the Nats starting right fielder and number 2 batter, 0 for 4 with a strikeout. Jesse Winker starting DH, number 3 batter, 0 for 3 with a walk and a couple of strikeouts. Catcher Keibert Ruiz, who of course had been better lately, starting catcher, number 5 batter, 0 for 4 with a strikeout. The Nats number 7 through 9 batters, Nick Senzel, Joey Gallo, Jacob Young, each guy going 0 for 3. And then there's C.J. Abrams. Abrams was doing pretty well as of a few games ago in terms of maybe finally coming out of his slump. And then these last 3 games have really been rough. Abrams on Friday night as the Nats starting shortstop and number 1 batter, 0 for 4 with a strikeout. And we had, I guess what you would call an injury scare with Abrams, although he did stay in the game. This was a bizarro play. So Patrick Corbin, we'll do more on him in a moment. The 2 runs that he allowed in this game both came in the bottom of the third. The first run that was scored came on an odd play. Runners on first and second, no outs, game scoreless. The Guardians' number 2 batter, Tyler Freeman, hit a grounder that went off third baseman Nick Senzel and then went off C.J. Abrams.
Here's the pitch. Swing off. Ground ball off the glove of Senzel. Knocked down by Abrams. Spalling on the infield. The ball rolls behind him. Rocchio's going to try to score. Abrams throws to Ruiz. The tag is too late. Over to third goes Kwan to second to throw there, and Freeman is safe there.
Who actually did an impressive job of gathering the ball and throwing home, but Brian Rocchio scored from second base on what was an RBI infield single by Tyler Freeman. Now, what was especially strange was that Abrams' throw clearly beat Rocchio to home plate, but Keibert Ruiz, this was odd. He went too high with his attempted tag, and the tag ended up missing. The Nats didn't even challenge the play. Davey Martinez initially was like, let me take a look at this. And then the Nats did not challenge the play. But then also on the play was Abrams getting banged up. And you watch the replay, it was scary looking. You didn't know if maybe he had gotten concussed. You didn't know if he had maybe suffered a shoulder injury. So there was a lot happening on that play, but good to see Abrams stay in the game.
Yeah, Patrick Corbin had the best description of that play. He said, it felt like you're watching Angels in the outfield, where the Angels are manipulating the ball around and moving it around without anybody being able to see it. It felt like you couldn't, natural physics could not allow a ball to move that way so perfectly to bounce off 2 different fielders and them not to be able to get anything out of it. It almost felt like it was supernatural what was going on. It was a scary play. C.J. Abrams face planted and hit the ground hard on his face and said that he had that split second where he kind of blacked out in terms of like he kind of looked up and like had to like compose himself and try to figure out where he was and be able to get his vision back. And that split second may have made the difference. Now, you said he recovered and he made a throw that looked like it should have been in plenty of time. It wasn't a perfect throw. It was up the line a bit. Keibert Ruiz, and I don't know if this is just that he didn't think there would be a play because of the way that CJ went down, or, and I know this is an issue with catchers nowadays, is so worried about, well, I can't block the plate, so I've got to be in front of it. He ends up in a position that wasn't ideal, and I think because of that, it gave a path for the runner to slide in around him and for him not to be able to get the tag down. And then after all that, the batter runs to second, and Keibert tries to throw him out at second, and he was safe. So, I mean, really unfortunate stuff all around, and that was kind of a subtle theme to this game, was the Nats had a couple opportunities to make some defensive plays that could have held the Guardians down and actually given themselves a chance to come back at the end. That play and then a double play that wasn't turned later on in the 7th inning wound up being really critical to them. And not that any of these were routine plays, but they were plays that they had a chance to make. And I think in the end, you do look at those on a game like this and say that could have been the difference.
Kevin Franzen on the MASN telecast of the game was pretty critical of Keibert Ruiz for his attempted tag on that play. And we have talked some about Keibert's defense. It still is not good. Certainly if you go by the metrics, Keibert came into Friday with -6 defensive runs saved for this regular season. You look at him over his 3 seasons now with the Nats, his 3 full seasons, 2022, 2023, 2024, -25 defensive runs saved total over those 3 regular seasons. Now, with the defensive metrics, you never want to just go by like 1 or 2 seasons, but once you get to 3 seasons, you're getting kind of a sample size here. And, look, there's still 4 months to go in this season, so let's see what happens. But defensively, there are issues with him. The framing numbers still are not very good. I don't want to make too big of a deal out of this one play because you're right, it was an awkward play, but his defense leaves a lot to be desired still.
You're not wrong about any of that. I think the troubling thing is that it's not just one area. It's not just throwing out runners. It's not just framing. It's kind of all these different things together, including, the play that we're talking about here. Now, I will give him credit later in the game, the Jacob Young assist. It was kind of a rainbow throw up the line a little bit, and Keibert did a nice job to make that play and put down the tag. But obviously, one good play doesn't necessarily negate one bad play, and they needed all of their defensive players to be better on this night.
From grown-worthy dad jokes to patching up skinned knees, your dad is one of a kind. This Father's Day, give him a gift that is guaranteed to take him to his happy place. Omaha Steaks. Order mouth-watering gift packages starting at just $89 when you go to omahasteaks.com and use promo code NATSCHAT at checkout. Each package is backed by their unconditional money-back guarantee. Show your dad the love he deserves with a gift as unforgettable as he is. Visit omahasteaks.com, promo code NATSCHAT at checkout. Here's your Nats minor league update for the games played on Friday as James Wood yet again out of the Rochester lineup. It's been over a week since he last played for the Red Wings. We're going to start in high A with the Fred Nats. Harlan Susana, 9 strikeouts in 5 innings of work. Susana was part of the Juan Soto trade from a couple years ago. And then up to Double A, Dylan Cruz, a pair of hits and also drew a walk. Played center field. Hitting behind him, Brady House, 0 for 5 with 3 strikeouts. House's OPS is down to 754. Now back to the show.
Bases loaded. Now the set and the 2-2 pitch. Fastball hit on the ground to third. Senzel has it. Throws to second for 1. Garcia jump throw to first with nothing on it, and he's safe. A run scores. 3-1 Cleveland. Garcia was shaded toward the hole. He had a long way to come to get it. And as he caught the throw at second, he had a fadeaway jump throw to first with nothing on it. And so Naylor avoids the double play, and the Guardians get a big run.
So with the Nats bullpen in this game, 3 Nats relievers combined to allow 5 runs in 2 innings. Not a good game for the pen, which overall has been good, as we have discussed. But Jacob Barnes, Robert Garcia, and Jordan Weems were the relievers utilized in this game. Barnes officially allowed 3 runs in a third of an inning. He would have ended up being a 4-run 7th for the Guardians, faced 4 batters, and got just 1 out as he recorded an out, but then issued a walk, gave up a single, allowed a stolen base, and then issued an intentional walk. Then things really got rough with Robert Garcia, who we know has had some problems with inherited runners. He allowed officially 1 run in 2/3 of an inning, but that does not tell the story. He came into the game bottom of the 7th, bases loaded, 1 out, Nats down 2-1. So he did come into the game in quite the predicament. He gave up what went down as a 1-out RBI fielder's choice grounder by Josh Naylor for a 3-1 Guardians lead. But that was that play that Mark just referenced. That came on a grounder off which the Nats nearly turned a double play, but did not turn the double play. And then the very next pitch, Garcia gave up a 2-out, 3-run homer by David Fry to left center field for a 6-1 Guardians lead. And then Jordan Weems in the bottom of the 8th allowed a run to put the Guardians up 7-1. So yeah, the non-turning of that double play that could have been was big for sure. But you noted this on X, and I think that this is significant. Tanner Rainey not pitching in that bottom of the 8th inning. Here you have the Nats down 6-1. That's pretty much blowout territory at that point. And Rainey doesn't pitch in that spot. I mean, we keep saying this with him, but if you're not going to pitch him in a spot like this, I feel like we've said that multiple times. If you're not going to pitch him in a spot like this, when are you going to pitch him? I feel like that stood out as much as anything with the bullpen on Friday night. This really has become absurd, this Tanner Rainey circumstance. They're carrying him, and they're never pitching him, and you say to yourself, what are we doing here?
Yeah, it's 100% valid, and you can't wait to be down 10 runs to use the guy. It's been 10 days since he pitched. They are in a stretch, as we've discussed, of 17 consecutive game days. You're down 5 runs in the bottom of the 8th to a very good team. Your guys are exhausted after the long night. I think it's okay to acknowledge, you know what, we're probably not going to come back up against Emmanuel Clase in the 9th from 5 runs down. Let's just put our guy out there and find out what he can do. It's been 10 days since he last pitched. He's only pitched in 3 games all month. They can't continue this, as we know. I think they know that, and they know that eventually there's going to come a point when they're going to make a move. I think at the moment, there is not necessarily somebody at AAA that is knocking on the door reliever-wise. My guess is they're maybe waiting now for whether it's Josiah Gray or Cade Cavalli, whichever one comes first. When they're ready and they join the rotation, that maybe Patrick Corbin moves to the bullpen, and then that takes Tanner Rainey's spot. That's all I can think of would be the rationale at this point. But it is very counterproductive. It's not helping Rainey. It's not helping the team. There has to be a way around this for them, whether it's an IL stint, whether it's putting him through waivers, which I think he would probably clear at this point, and let him go to AAA and try to figure things out. It's gotten to a point that's pretty ridiculous, to be honest, that you can't carry an 8th man and an 8-man bullpen that you never use, okay? And it's one thing if it's, okay, well, this is a long man who you use when the starter gets knocked out early, and that just hasn't happened here lately. No, you're not talking about that. You're talking about one inning at the end of a game where they're trailing. Not saying you have to replace him with a high leverage guy, but somebody else who can help take some pressure off the other. So that is a problem. I want to go back real quick. The double play, the non-double play you talked about, I thought it was interesting finding out after the fact about what was really going on that play. And I think it's important to note this because Robert Garcia gets tagged with giving up those runs and giving up the home run. He got exactly what they needed with the bases loaded, a ground ball. It was the matchup they wanted against the lefty hitting Naylor. The problem was the Nats kind of had the infield shifted. Luis Garcia is way over in the hole on the second base side. CJ Abrams is closer to second, and the ball goes to Senzel in between third and short. They wanted Abrams to actually turn the double play. They wanted that to be a 5-6-3 instead of a 5-4-3. And the problem was that Abrams on contact went for the ball thinking maybe he had a play on it. So now Garcia has to come a much longer distance. And you add that all up, Senzel had a double clutch. Garcia, by the time he got the ball, was not in a great position to make the throw. They still almost turned it. If that's a cleaner play, if Abrams immediately goes to second, that's probably a very easy inning-ending double play. And now the next batter, David Fry, who has murdered left-handers, the Nats knew that. They didn't want Garcia to have to face him. The idea was to get out of the inning before that guy ever came up. Well, now look what happens. 3-run homer on the first pitch. So Garcia gets tagged with a lot of that. I feel like he did his job. The defense let him down.
Naylor, by the way, busted it down the first base line. He does not look necessarily fleet of foot, but that doesn't mean that he can't be at least somewhat fleet of foot, and he was in that moment. I give him credit for that. Yeah, the Rainey thing really is something. It's hard to recall a circumstance like this where you carry a guy, you're not using the guy, he's not a Rule 5 draft guy, and you're like, why are we doing this? And, it's funny. Erasmo Ramirez had a great 2022 season, got off to a bad start last season, and the Nats cut him by June. The Nats didn't show fierce loyalty to Erasmo Ramirez, and yet they are demonstrating this extreme loyalty to Tanner Rainey that really is something. And if, in fact, they're waiting for the return of Josiah Gray or Cade Cavalli, neither return is imminent. We've been waiting a while for these two guys to come back. It's still going to be a while until they're back. So if we're going to keep dancing this dance until one of those guys comes back, you're looking at this Rainey thing going on for at least another few weeks.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it's at least 2, if not 3 weeks away from any of that happening. And how long are you going to let that continue, especially as we said, when the schedule is not real conducive and you want to be able to use other guys. And you're right. It is fascinating sometimes how quickly they'll pull the trigger on somebody who they don't necessarily have a long-term relationship with, and they don't feel that bad about doing that. And yet they hang on to guys who've been here for a very long time, like Victor Robles, like Tanner Rainey. And on one hand, you say, okay, some loyalty to somebody who's been an important part of your team and, was on the World Series team and all that. But I think you also have to rationally look at the situation and say it's not good for the team. It's not good for Tanner Rainey to be wasting away in the bullpen like that. And on top of that all, you probably could keep him at AAA. I don't know how many teams are desperate to claim Tanner Rainey off waivers, pay him, I think he makes at least $1 million as an arbitration guy, and now have him in their bullpen knowing how much he has struggled and how he really hasn't made it back from Tommy John surgery. So you're hanging on to a guy out of fear that, he's out of options. Chances are he'd clear waivers and you'd still have him anyways if that's the route you want to go.
And it's got to be humiliating for him because he understands what's happening. His teammates aren't dumb. They get it. They see these blowout opportunities that Rainey could be pitching in and isn't pitching in. And it's got to feel bad if you're Rainey. It's got to be a tough pill to swallow that your manager won't use you in almost any spot at this point. That is tough. It wasn't that long ago that Rainey was the Nats closer, and we were talking about him as a key back end of the bullpen guy for this team. And here he is now, buried about as deep as you can be buried.
Tim Shovers here to tell you about Game Time. This summer at Jiffy Lube Live, acts include Neil Young, Hank Williams Jr., and Chris Stapleton. If you're interested in finding tickets to any of these shows, make sure to check out the Game Time app. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code NATSCHAT for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code NATSCHAT for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Now the pitch. Swinging a line drive center field, base hit. Young charges it, has it on a hop. Runner's going to try and score. Throw to the plate, they may get him. Ruiz has it, the tag out front. He is out at the plate. Ruiz tags out Kwan, who had to go to the front side of the plate as the throw took Ruiz to the backside. But there was no block of the plate. He tried to avoid the tag of the throw by Young, who gets his 4th outfield assist of the year. 8-2 on the scoring for the second out of the inning.
Well, a sneaky bright spot for the Nats on Friday night in this 7-1 loss at the Guardians was Patrick Corbin. He actually had one of his better starts this season. 2 runs in 6 innings. Now, he did put a good number of guys on base. He gave up 6 hits, which were a double, and 5 singles. He issued 3 walks, but he did have 5 strikeouts, which by current Corbin standards is pretty good. 5 Ks in 6 innings. He threw 90 pitches, 57 strikes versus 33 balls. And that is the thing, that final score 7-1, if you didn't watch the game, you don't think much of it, but Corbin had the Nats in this game with his effectiveness, at least in avoiding giving up runs. Like I said, he put guys on base, but 2 runs in 6 innings ultimately.
Yeah, he made some pitches when he needed to, and even the 2 runs, as we outlined there, that he gave up, one was on that freak pinball play with Senzel and Abrams, the other's on a ground ball that scored the runner. So he did not give up an RBI hit at any point. I don't think he gave an extra base hit, a double in the second, but that was it. But he made the pitches when he had to, got through the 6th, 90 pitches, very effective. The Guardians, I know they don't have a lot of big names. They lead the American League in runs scored. So this has been a very good lineup. And for Corbin to hold them in check, I think is a big deal. He becomes the 4th straight Nats starter to hold the opposition to 2 runs or less, and the one who preceded that, Mitchell Parker, only gave up 3 runs to the Braves. So you've got a turn straight through the rotation against the Braves and Guardians. Every single one of them has given up 3 runs or less. That's a phenomenal stretch, and the longer it keeps going on, the more you say, this is how this team can stay competitive and potentially stay in a race all year if you get that kind of quality starting pitching. The weak link has been Corbin. Well, this game was not a weak link situation at all. He absolutely deserved, if not a win, at least he gave him a chance to win. He certainly did not deserve to take a loss.
The impressive run of starting pitching continued with Patrick Corbin on Friday night. There are no 2 ways about it. You mentioned Victor Robles. We were texting about this earlier in the day on Friday. So he got designated for assignment on Monday. There's been some confusion as to when we'll find out what is the result of the DFAing. And I know there's been some mixed messaging here. So what is the deal? When are we going to find out what is the result of Victor Robles having been DFA'd?
Yeah, it's a complicated process because multiple different things can happen, and they each have different windows of time they can happen. With the DFA, you can be claimed off waivers within 72 hours, but it can still, the roster limbo can extend for a full week because the team is allowed to take up to a week to either trade you or to ultimately release you if you're not claimed off waivers by somebody else. So that led me to believe that we may not get anything until Monday, which would be the 7-day window. But I was told that we should have the resolution to this come at some point on Saturday. I think we have a sense of where this is probably going. I don't believe he was claimed. I think we would know that by now if he was claimed off waivers. I'm guessing they didn't work out a trade with anybody. And I think, as we've discussed, there's not a lot of reason to believe that he would want to go to AAA or that they'd even want him at AAA at this point, taking up a spot that might go to somebody else who has potential future with the organization. So I think the end result of all this is going to be we find out that he's now a free agent and has a chance to sign with somebody else. And it sounds like we should finally learn something about that on Saturday.
So that was what I was going to ask you. The fact that we have heard nothing would seem to suggest that he was not claimed on waivers, because if he was claimed, then that would be the end of it, right? He would have been picked up by somebody, and we would probably know that by now, correct?
Yeah, the only thing I'm not sure is because you are allowed to make a trade in those 7 days, and that could be a case of like if multiple teams put in waiver claims on him, then the Nats have a chance to negotiate with those teams and work out a trade for whoever is willing to give up more. So I'm going to say there's like this sliver of possibility that that's what's actually going on. But had he just been claimed and they let him go in that way, I think we would have known that one by now, because I believe that that's a 72-hour window.
Well, it was interesting to me. Mike Rizzo, in his weekly appearance on the Sports Junkies this past Wednesday morning, in talking about Victor Robles, certainly talked about him in the past tense.
He's 27 years old, and he's still got a lot of tools, and he was floundering here.
Made it very clear that it was in Robles' best interest to be somewhere else. Like, he was not shy about expressing that. So, yeah, I mean, it sure sounds like Robles is done with the Nats in some form. And to Mark's point, hopefully on Saturday, we'll find out exactly what the deal is there. Well, we have game 2 of this 3-game series for the Nats at a team in the Guardians. I mean, I'm sure many people listening know this. The Guardians are one of the best teams in baseball this season. So this is not an easy series here for the Nats. The Guardians have the second best record in the American League, but game 2 of this 3-game series Saturday afternoon, 4:10. Mitchell Parker will be the Nats starting pitcher. You tell us what you think. Hit us up on X at Nats_chat. You can email the podcast, natschatpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget, we are offering shout-outs on the Nats Chat podcast this season. If you want to send well wishes, congratulations, whatever, to someone who you care about, email Tim Shovers, natschatpodcast@gmail.com, and know that these shout-outs, they're not just necessarily one-time things. You can download the show in which you have your shout-out and keep it for posterity's sake, send it to your friends, etc. So it's not just something that evaporates into the podcast atmosphere. It is with you for as long as you want to have it with you. We have a website that you can check out, natschatpodcast.com, in which you can purchase a Nats Chat podcast t-shirt. All Nationals radio highlights on Nats Chat are courtesy of 106.7 The Fan. For Mark Zuckerman, I'm Al Galdi. We thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on the Nats Chat podcast.
Primary Election Day is Tuesday, June 4th. Now is the time to make a plan. Whether you plan to vote absentee by mail, in person at your county auditor's office before Election Day, or at your polling place on June 4th, it's important you take steps now to make your plan at voterready.iowa.gov. Remember, Election Day is Tuesday, June 4th. Find more info at voterready.iowa.gov. This message is presented by the Iowa Secretary of State.